We are, was it 7 time zones apart, maybe? So
9
there might be a
hours.
little bit of lag. 9 hours. 9 hours apart, might be a little lag. But Carly is here to talk about humanitarian design and architecture and what she does and that career path. So why don't I just hand it over to you, Carly, and you do an introduction of your past, who you are, and a little bit of what you're doing right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Yeah, I went to Cal Poly and studied architecture, and I graduated in 2015. Yeah, at that stage, kind of in the midst of my degree, I had been thinking a lot about how I wanted to apply my education, and at the same time felt kind of this burden to really apply it well and to really serve people with it somehow. But I'd been kind of looking for opportunities to do that within the kind of typical architectural industry in the U.S. And I had done internships at a firm in my hometown for a few summers, and around California, and kind of trying to get different experiences. And yeah, I guess I can kind of just go through the story chronologically, but in around my 4th year, while I was studying abroad, I came across this new world, and I think that came through, I was reading a book. It was the Architecture for Humanity book written called Design Like You Give a Damn. And it talked a lot about these different projects and professionals that had used their architectural design skills and construction skills in the developing world, in places that are inflicted with extreme poverty or conflict or disasters, natural disasters, man-made disasters, and just kind of doing development and helping out poor communities or vulnerable communities of people using design. And I thought, wow, this is not something I have heard or really dug into before. So that started this process of learning about this kind of social impact design industry that's kind of bridges into the humanitarian sector, which is something that really sparked my interest and sparked my passions. And then going into my 5th year, when I was doing my final thesis project at Cal Poly, I wanted to do something that was really tangible and that gave back to vulnerable communities somewhere, and thought, how am I going to do this? I don't really have a direction. I came across this local nonprofit called Journeyman International that had started at Cal Poly, and it involves students and connects them with NGOs and people working in like humanitarian relief and development in different parts of the world. And I thought, oh, this seems really aligned to what I've been learning about humanitarian design. And so I applied for the program, and I got paired up for my thesis project with an NGO working in the Philippines. They're doing kind of a disaster relief project. They wanted to build a community center in a community that had been hit pretty hard by a typhoon the year prior. And so I received this brief and got connected to this nonprofit and got to know them really well and understand the need. And throughout this process of researching and designing, and I got to go to the site and assess, what's the situation here, what's the culture like, what do the people want, what do they need in the event of a typhoon, and how could they be using this building in the interim, in the meantime, when there aren't disasters. And understanding all of this dynamic was just so exciting and so interesting to me. And so I finished the project at the end of my 5th year, and was just so in love with this this sector that I had discovered that was it was a bit unique. I think not many of my fellow students had really talked about, you know, wanting to go into development and humanitarian world, and so I felt a little bit out of place, but still that this was kind of this is the area of work that I really wanted to go into. But I also needed a job coming out of school. So I worked for a couple of years after I graduated in LA, and Southern California. I worked at an architecture firm that was doing like multifamily housing and commercial and retail and kind of your standard like mixed use design projects, and a little bit of urban planning in there. And I really got this great like technical knowledge and developed these skills in dealing with clients and dealing with different stakeholders and subcontractors, and coordinating and drawing at different levels from conceptual to nitty-gritty detailed design drawings. And over that very short time, a couple of years, I just built up my confidence, and then in the meantime was continuing to volunteer with Journeyman International. And so I got connected at one point through Journeyman as a volunteer to this organization in Rwanda, which Andrew Goodwin had been working with right before I jumped in. And Andrew had designed this amazing library that was built like very quickly after he designed it in this rural part of Rwanda. And Rwanda's a tiny little country in East Africa, and I thought, I've never been to Africa before, but this sounds like a cool nonprofit. They wanted to build more projects around this library that Andrew had done. And they had asked for some more support in doing kind of a master plan. I thought, okay, I have some skills that I've learned in my short career so far. So I jumped into that, and I traveled to Rwanda soon after starting the project. So I got to really see the site and understand the context. And man, as soon as I arrived in this country, I felt like this is it, like this is where I need to be. And I didn't know really what that would look like, but I saw such need in the architectural sector in East Africa in general, and I thought, wow, like this is kind of a new world. It's sort of an unknown or a new industry in East Africa, and it was very like bare bones, untapped field of work in this context that I thought, like, I want to jump into this. And also there's a lot of like socioeconomic need as well. There's you know, we have poverty here, there's conflict all around, and there are people being displaced, and people having to deal with these external factors that are that are causing these issues and causing the poverty and a lot of harm. And so I thought, wow, like architecture, and even seeing Andrew's project, the library, come to life and really serve the community that it was in such a beautiful way. I thought, wow, like architecture can do a lot to help mitigate these problems caused by, you know, war, disaster, conflict, and poverty. And so I stayed involved with this project through JI in Rwanda as a volunteer, but slowly but surely got sucked in further and offered a full-time position with both JI and with the local nonprofit. And so that would require me to full-time move to Rwanda and be based in East Africa for an indefinite period of time, and kind of do more in the area of development and humanitarian work in this region of the world. And so that's what I've been doing since 2017 now. And continuing to work with this one particular project that I started with, but also growing into really plugging into the architectural sector here in Rwanda. And I'm currently running the JI program, connecting students in Rwanda and other parts of Africa to local NGOs, so that African designers can have the opportunity to participate in the socioeconomic development and relief in their home countries or their home regions, and have that experience and that opportunity that I had when I was a student and young professional. So yeah, so that's where I'm at now, and that's kind of how I got there.
Nice.
And we'll see how happens.
So let me ask two questions. That's kind of a two-parter, but the first part is, since you have experience in both the Philippines and Rwanda now, and East Africa in general, what does the role of the architect look like in other countries outside the United States?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said about the architectural industry in this kind of like the developing world, it's a new field of work, kind of. We're so used to in the West, we're so used to architecture as being sort of a cultural expression and like a very pronounced part of our landmark and understanding of our own cultures and our own geography, and in places like the Philippines and in Rwanda and other parts of Africa, the cultural landmarks are not the buildings, but the landscape. And people live this more outside, or outdoors lifestyle. And buildings are just a place of shelter. And whereas like in the West, buildings are more a place of comfort and expression in Africa, it's definitely emerging very quickly, actually, too. The architecture and design is emerging as more of an expression of culture and nationalism and style, and that's it's sort of like going back in time a little bit in the industry that we know in the West, and so it's been interesting to be able to sort of plug in and get involved in this industry here. It's a lot easier to do because there aren't all these well-established systems, like in these associations and rules and all these things. So I've found that working in this in kind of the developing context, it's more playful and it's more experimental. It's kind of like a designer's playground in some ways, because everything is kind of new in comparison. Nice. But I think that's the biggest difference that I've noticed.
So, the second part of this is actually probably a little bit more interesting in the fact that you've also had the experience as an architectural designer in the West, and now in East Africa. What's the difference in your mind from a personal standpoint of those two professions? Like, what's the what does that do to your personality? What does that do to you personally? How do you feel the difference?
Yeah, I think both are very challenging in very different ways. And what I found in my the beginning of my career in California was that like the levels of like bureaucracy that you have to kind of follow through within each project. You have so many levels of kind of checkpoints and negotiations and so many moving parts and so many factors that go into each step. And it can be tiring and very, very challenging in that way. And then in a different way, I think in working in East Africa now, we have our different set of bureaucracies where it's much more of a community scale and much more of an like unpredictability of, you're resolving like land disputes on site with these, two people who are, fighting with machetes over property and dealing with like local governments that have their own set of like unpredictabilities and rules and like micro bureaucracies, and dealing with people in a different way that's like culturally very different from what I grew up with. So having to learn those dynamics and learning how people resolve conflicts in this context now, and how people move through those levels of bureaucracies, and just like the slowness and the challenges, the letdowns, the loopholes, and all of that. It's like a new rule book, a completely new system that it takes a while to get used to, and you never really get used to it because it changes all the time. But in different ways than it changes in the States.
Wow, that's a good point. So what does your day-to-day look like? And I know you have two jobs, but two different organizations to answer to. But what does your day-to-day look like as an architect, as a practicing professional?
Well, one of my favorite parts of life here is that no days look the same. Like between one day in the same week can look completely opposite from the next day. I think on average though, I do spend a lot of time in an office, and sometimes I work from home. Nowadays I work from home all the time. But a lot of the time I go in the office, I'm collaborating with other professionals, both in different fields. Like I'm Rwandan engineers, Rwandan architects, expat or international business people and contractors, and having a lot of collaborative meetings, working in a team. Going out to site is usually is very common too. Maybe once a week, I'm in the field. I'm in a village in the mountains in the middle of Rwanda, and hiking around in the mud, and scoping out a site, taking measurements, doing sketching on site, interviewing community members or leaders in the area. Or like going to government offices, having meetings with different policymakers and officials to get something through, applying for building permits, whatever that looks like. And yeah, it looks different every day, but I think my time is pretty evenly spread between office time, moving around, traveling a lot, and being out in the countryside, and interacting with people a lot.
So did your previous job actually really help with those aspects that you're talking about, that's preparing you for it? Or did you really have to learn a lot on the fly and learn by doing?
Yes, a lot of learning on the fly. I was not prepared for a lot of like the dynamic of moving around and the unpredictability of this type of job that I now have, with a much more structured and predictable environment in my previous jobs, and that was probably the biggest difference, and actually really hard to get used to, and I think this kind of context that I'm in now is not for the faint of heart, and not for people who like predictability and routine and rhythm. And you can find little routines in this, but for the most part, there's so many different dynamics, and it's so think on your feet all the time, on the fly, in a culture that you're not familiar with, and I think that was really challenging, and I had never experienced before.
Wow. Is there anything that you can look back on in your Cal Poly education that was very helpful? Maybe outside of JI, and I know maybe talk a little bit about that program, but was there something else that prepared you or helped you get into this mindset, or that these students could even look towards to help if they want to get into the field?
Mm. Yeah, I actually in recent years I've heard Cal Poly is doing a great job at kind of like broadening the variety of like teaching styles and exposure that it brings into the it's like the architecture and the architecture engineering construction majors. And I really love that. But when I was a student a long time ago, not really.
Not that long ago.
When I was yeah, when I was a student, I think I really benefited from the team projects and the group environment, working with students coming from other backgrounds, and the sort of interdisciplinary projects and classes that I participated in really helped in preparing for working in general too. I mean, anywhere in the architectural industry, you're working with a team. Like I always say, like architects are built-in project managers, where you're taking all these different pieces and all these different people, you're coordinating them together. And Cal Poly does a great job of bringing different industries and different backgrounds together, and I think that was probably the most beneficial. And of course, like the technical knowledge and the kind of business knowledge that I picked up in Cal Poly days were also really helpful. But I think mostly the team, like hands-on practice, was most helpful now.
And for the students that are taking this class that are not fifth years yet, the JI program, even the one that you went through, did you have other team members from other disciplines working on that project in the Philippines? I can't remember.
Yeah, I worked with, I think, 2 architecture engineers and 1 construction management student. And we're a team of 4. We met like weekly, and we produced different deliverables that were related to our fields. And and it was all used too by the final product was handed off to the client, and they were able to take the engineering drawings and the construction schedule and budgets and things like that and apply them. So it was really helpful.
And you were able to just recently go and see it, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was.
So how did that feel?
Oh my gosh, that was one of the most profound experiences in my life. I think going back to the place that and kind of the community, and seeing the people that made such a huge impact on the trajectory of my career, and just my growing passion for humanitarian work and relief, and seeing my project built and functioning, and it's a church. So the pastor of the church lives in the building that I helped design, and back when I actually had done it, I handed it off, and there were some political issues, logistical issues that caused the local team on the ground had to kind of rework the design. And that initially was kind of disappointing, because I thought, oh man, I wanted my exact drawings to come to life in this building as I imagined it. Like my ego took over, and like I wanted it to look like this. But over the next couple of years, and after it was built, I realized, if this thing is functioning as it's supposed to, and if it's impacting the community and helping people, and providing a safe refuge for this community in the event of a typhoon, then it served its purpose, and I've done what I needed to do. And when I went back, it was there were elements of this building and the way it was constructed that really reflected my initial design, my intent, and my vision. And I could see bits and pieces like tapered columns or concrete benches or things that I had put into my drawings that were there. And that was so cool to see. And I got to meet the family that lives in my building now. And they were just so excited about it. And they said, oh yeah, it's a great space. Our church meets here every Sunday, and anytime there's a storm, people actually come to this place, and they come for help and support. And it's done a great it's withstood multiple storms over the years, and it's been like 5 years now, and it was just so special to see that in this context and experience it myself.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful what you said, and it ties back to this idea of what social impact design really is, but can feel or see or experience the impact that a building can have on the community, and be there for the most resilient opportunities of a community. I think that's wonderful. That's a really good reason to project. What is it that you're working on right now? Can you talk about any of the projects that you got going on in Rwanda?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Well, we're still working on the project I originally came over here for, and initially it was like a community center, multi-purpose center, and that was the first project. But then that's kind of expanded into multiple projects we've built already or are in the process of building. Like we built a small latrine nearby the library that you designed. We put a little like mini eco lodge nearby for kind of a community income generator for local business in this particular village. And across the country, we've built, recently under construction was a physiotherapy center designed by one of our alumni. I think that's almost done. And also a library over there that I got to help put together some drawings for, and in another part of the country we have a school that's under construction that was designed by JI designer, and even outside of Rwanda we have a number of projects going on right now in Uganda. We've designed projects and built projects in Malawi, design projects in South Africa. Currently we have a project in Zimbabwe that's underway, and a lot of my time too is spent trying to push these designs into implementation. And like it's not finished when the design is done. You know, you have to fund it, you have to put a team on the ground, you have to do all the coordination and logistics. And since I'm both on the side of the designer and the client, I'm kind of pushing for construction at the same time as I'm bringing in the design. So kind of have been bridging that gap on a lot of different projects in Rwanda especially, and working with students here to design projects in Rwanda by Rwandan designers has been really fun too, because they have they're taught in this country how to use local materials and methods, and they know the culture, and they provide amazing insight even to our international students. So bringing all of them together, and other professionals working with us to come up with the most appropriate designs that fit into the environment and the culture has been huge. So a lot of coordination right now. But yeah, it's cool to see the fruits of our labor and to see these designs come up and get built. And sometimes it takes a long time. That's what I've learned. You know, I've been here for 3 years and the original design has not been built, but I have full faith that it will eventually. Mm-hmm.
Standing in the way right now on that project?
Funding. We've been doing every so often we do another fundraising campaign or push, and then something happens, a rainstorm washes out the retaining wall, and we have to allocate all of our expenses to that and start again. Yeah. And getting permitting is not that difficult, but sometimes land title disputes can get in the way in certain projects. But yeah, I think funding is the biggest hurdle.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you and I won't put you on the spot too much, but if you could tell these students what they should do if they're interested in this, what would be your biggest piece of advice? If they're interested in the humanitarian sector and wanting to do what Carly does, what would you suggest?
Oh man. Well, I'll get my device. My best advice is be patient. You don't you don't expect to be an expert from day one. Expect to spend a lot of time soaking in information and skills and experience. And I'm still very much in the midst of soaking. And yeah, and just be open to weird opportunities, volunteer opportunities. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be with JI, it can be anything. You know, always try to have some side projects going on in the background, whether you're just kind of thinking about something, learning, taking online classes about, I don't know, humanitarian relief and things like that. And just learn, just like soak it in. And that was kind of a humbling lesson that I learned my first couple of years, and I'm still learning now, is that I'm not an expert, and actually we're all not perfect, and we're all learning, no matter how far along you are in your career. So yeah, so don't be so hard on yourself when you're working in a job that you might not love, or you might not love the position that you're in, but like take advantage of that. And I always think of like each job is kind of a stepping stone in the direction, hopefully in the direction you want to go. So always be kind of assessing, is this the direction I want to be going? If not, how can I add to it that will help me feel that fulfillment, and that I'm moving to the right, into the right path. But yeah, just stay humble.
So this is kind of selfish of me to ask, but where are you going to be? You're talking about stepping stones. Where are you going to be in 5 years? Because I've seen, just for everybody that you don't know, I've seen Carly since she was a wee pup in the university. And now she's doing great things in another country. So I kind of want to know, what's your plan?
Yeah, that's funny. I remember when you were helping me decide what jobs to apply to after graduation. Man, I was a mess, and I still am figuring it out. And yeah, I mean, I would love to see myself in 5 years, continuing to work with JI and to grow it into, an even more dynamic and globalized, a big team, an army of like humanitarian designers, who care about the well-being of humanity in the world, and care about sustainability. I want to see more students come out of their university experience with the same drive that I felt when I was coming out, and I had this great this great exposure to the developing world and to the need that's out there. And I could be in another country. I could be in Rwanda, but I would love to continue to be doing this type of work in like humanitarian relief or development, and be using design and using architecture and construction to make a positive impact on humanity, whether that's at a tiny scale or if that's a higher level. I don't really know, but I just really in love with the work that I'm doing now, and would love to continue that forever.
So if we can follow you or keep track of you, how do we do that? How do we see what Carly's doing? How can I tell these students to keep in touch with you?
Well, on the professional side, I think following Journeyman International on social media. We're on Instagram as Journeyman_int for international, and you can go to our website and see all the projects that are put up. If you'd like to follow me personally, also on social media, and try to keep that up to date. And I have a website, and On Instagram, I am AfriCarly. And I'm on Facebook, and I'm always open to people reaching out too. And I have an email with ji carly@journeymaninternational.org. And yeah, I love to connect with students or people early in their careers, thinking about options. So yeah, feel free to connect.
Awesome. Any last thoughts or comments? I mean, you've been great.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess the last comment would just be just kind of as an encouragement to emerging professionals and students who are in that phase and considering the direction they want to head with their careers. I think the education in this industry that we get from our experience at Cal Poly, and even just having a degree in general is such a valuable thing, and don't take it lightly. And I think pat yourself on the back. You've gotten this far, and there's so much more ahead of you. And adulthood and career does not have to be boring. And some of us think that, I'm going to graduate, it's just going to be mundane and routine and boring. But man, you can end up in a village in East Africa and look at your life and be like, how did I get here? And at any point in your career. And so just be open to things and different opportunities that come your way, and take them and value your skills, because they're huge. You can impact the world with them. I just feel encouraged.
That's amazing. Well, thank you, Carly, for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate that you asked me to come on here. This was really fun.
It was good catching up.
Yeah, totally.